Hey, warmer from below! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSIN family podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by Ben Wilson. He does an absolutely amazing work over here at VSIN, and we're going to be talking with him about just what we've been seeing here in the transfer portal over the last few weeks, how the tenor of these mid-major teams has very much changed, the teams that you might want to be looking to back/fade towards the early part of the season, and just how much chemistry does or does not mean in terms of college basketball as well. We're also going to be taking a look a little bit about the coaching carousel as well. He, much like myself, is a man from the great state of Wisconsin, so we're going to have some things to say about the, shall we say, change in philosophy that we've seen from the Big Ten, the fact that they are embracing the transfer portal much more in this day and age than they were just a few short seasons ago. So we have a lot to chat about with them, and we're going to be doing so here in a few minutes. Really not going to be giving you guys too much in terms of our first segment. We're just going to dive into the guest interview, unless if you guys do have questions, and I very much do invite you guys to be able to ask a few questions on this podcast, because if there's anything that you want answered, I am more than happy to address that. If you do have any segment ideas, anything that you want to hear on this podcast in general, you've got one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry ZM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and everything here on Coast to Coast Hoops that is brought to you by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost.bet, they're making sure that bettors are able to access their funds 24/7, 365, because it's running on just pretty much being a bank account. It's not utilizing credit or anything like that. And when you do go to EdgeBoost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, that is GREG. You get a $1 for $1 match on your first $25 deposit. Now let's dive into it with one of our good friends in Ben Wilson. He does an absolutely amazing work here at VSIN, doing our weekend shows mainly with regards to Live Bet Saturday, Live Bet Sunday, but he is a man of so many different talents. He does a great job of being able to do play-by-play work with regards to tennis, college baseball, college basketball. You see this guy all over the place. And when it comes to the summer months, oftentimes when people take vacations here at VSIN, he becomes a utility guy that's on a little bit of every show, and he does so also well with all of those shows as well. Absolutely love getting Ben aboard, and like I said, a gentleman that is also from the great state of Wisconsin, much like myself, a suffering Brewers fan that is preparing for the team to somehow, someway make the playoffs, somehow, someway look like they're going to advance to the playoffs, and somehow, someway let us down when they get to the playoffs. So that's always fun. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Ben_Wilson, and then another underscore and the number 1 altogether. And Ben, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yes, Greg. Look, we're eternal optimists though here on this program. So Brewers, Milwaukee Bucks, whatever. We're always feeling like there's positivity. And I think that's what a lot of college basketball teams are feeling like now in this new age of portal and all these mid-major guys. I call out of mid-major games. They've had good seasons, and now you just kind of keep refreshing your Twitter every day because they seem to all be going to Power Fives. We're kind of just getting used to what the new reality is in the state of hoops.
Well, you're probably the only one on this call right now that is optimistic about the Milwaukee Bucks. I am not necessarily feeling it in their series against the Indiana Pacers, but I am feeling very optimistic about college basketball. But 2,278 players in the transfer portal, and I keep saying this, it would be easier to make a list of guys not in the transfer portal right now than guys actually in the transfer portal, because when you add in there the fact that, there were a few guys that graduated this past year, yeah, there's more guys in the portal than are guys that are actually returning to school. But just what do you make out of all this, and trying to be able to keep track of it all, because we always try to talk about looking for chemistry with teams and everything like that. But at this point, every single team is going to need to hit the transfer portal, and every single team is going to have so much turnover from the previous year.
It's a good point. And I think we've also learned, though, that it's not just this uniform, automatic outcome when you have a team that just totally gets rebuilt from scratch. That's probably why you've seen, such an emphasis on it, because teams have proven, you can win without any returning starters. Hell, you can win without any returning players, period. And so it's not one of those things where you look at a team and go, okay, well, they're going to be entirely new next year. I'm automatically going to look at them with a little more hesitancy or uncertainty. In a lot of ways, what's hard about it is you have to go on a case-by-case basis. And, especially like for me looking at some of these mid-majors, it's going to take until probably like, October, November to sort of feel like, okay, what are these teams even looking like? And who do I feel comfortable, backing in the early season portion when there is so much of that uncertainty? So that's kind of where I look at it from a very macro point of view. But there's also examples where, I do all the WAC tournament games. Grand Canyon returned everybody basically from their 2023 or 2024 NCAA tournament team. They should have, by all measures, just rolled through that conference. a conference that was decimated more so than about any in the portal. And then they kind of stumped their toes through the regular season, struggled, weren't even the number one seed, and ultimately ended up winning the conference tournament, but it didn't come easy. And that's sort of the case of you can't really just lump these teams in buckets either way. You got to be really judicious about it. And when you're talking about 364 D1 teams, it's very hard to feel confident in doing that. So I always just say kind of express some patience at this time of year and wait for everything to kind of sort out. And if there's guys in the portal who you liked at smaller conference teams that you thought made a big impact, just kind of make a note of them and circle back to them once the roster is a little bit more set, and understand those could be some play on teams or individuals that you might want to target when the season gets underway.
And I'm so glad that you bring that up as well, because I think that you're the perfect man to be able to speak to this. The guys that maybe didn't see a lot of minutes at the higher level, but they're former like top 150, top 100 recruits, and they go down a level. I think that these are some of the toughest guys to gauge, because some of these guys are just flops. Some of these guys, they just give you nothing whatsoever, but we've seen really good examples. A guy from our home state of Wisconsin, Braden Podziemski, he began his career at Illinois, couldn't get out there on the floor, goes to Santa Clara, and boom, he becomes a first-round draft pick, and now we see him being able to contribute some meaningful minutes for the Golden State Warriors. How do you gauge sort of that? Because I do think that that's one of the most difficult things to do in all of college basketball. And you have an front row seat to all of that with regards to covering the WAC, covering so many of these mid-major conferences, because I think that you've seen it as well as anyone. Some of these guys that go down a level, they just absolutely boom, and some of these guys, they just never really find their footing.
Absolutely. And I remember thinking about that more this past cycle. I remember we talked to KT Turner, who's the coach at UT Arlington, and I remember asking him about Lance Ware, who fits that billing. I mean, this is a guy who was...
And he was good this year.
Yeah, highly recruited. I mean, this is a guy who was at Kentucky, goes to Villanova, didn't play at all. And a lot of it, it comes down to confidence. And KT Turner was telling us, this guy Lance Ware, and this you can use, this is sort of a thing that applies for a lot of these transfers from high major to mid major. Lance Ware just didn't play much, so he didn't have a lot of confidence, and he came in. He wasn't really like a leader by any means, and they really had to coach him up and build his confidence back. So it's almost like for those guys, you kind of wait a little bit, see once they're integrated into the new system, and don't panic necessarily if it doesn't look great from the start, because Ware got off to a very slow start, and then all of a sudden just kind of exploded onto the scene and became one of the best mid-major players in the country, and a team that otherwise had a lot of issues and was under 500, wasn't very good. Ware kept them in a lot of games each and every night for UT Arlington. So that's just one example, and there's going to be a lot more of those guys as things progress. Guys just want an opportunity for playing time more than anything. So that's kind of how I look at it. Maybe you don't assume immediate payoff, but once those sorts of players who have the pedigree get that confidence back and get more integrated into the system, that's when you can maybe feel a little more confident about backing some of those teams. And maybe you look at a team that struggles for 10, 15 games in the non-con, playing a tough schedule, and they become a buy low team once they get into their conference slates.
I think that that's also something that I love to be able to express, and that's something that I look at myself, being able to take a look at some of these teams and maybe fade them early and back them late. It used to be Eric Musselman back when he was over at Arkansas, now UCLA, where you figured that those first 10, 12 games with a whole bunch of transfers coming in were going to be rough, but you knew that you were going to be able to get their best basketball in February and March. And I think that that does now go for a little bit more of the mid-major level. Some of these teams that they bring back a lot of minutes, like Northern Arizona, I thought was a prime example of this, a team that is very experienced. You bring back 90% of your minutes. You want to bet on those teams early, but in terms of being able to back them in like February or March, you look at more or less the raw talent rather than the actual chemistry itself.
No doubt. We're sitting here April 19th, trying to figure out how this will all shake out. And what it leads me into thinking, Greg, is just, and we've heard a lot of people talk about, all right, well, are the mid-majors, are they just dead? Are they never going to win a tournament game again? Like 1 year of data sample size isn't enough for me to totally, jump off board of the thought that mid-majors can still be competitive when it comes to March Madness in the tournament. But what I more just go to naturally as a bettor and someone who just follows the sport, it leads into more volatility and opportunity to look at these, these mid-major conferences and think, man, you could get some leagues where you've got like 5, 6, 7 teams that are live to win the conference. And it might not be a team that's got, a couple of super high major skill set players that are on it and are going to win 30 games, be like a Murray State, John Morant type team that are just rolling through their respective conference and will be a very dangerous 10 or 11 seed. Those sorts of teams I don't think will really exist just because of the portal, but I still think you're going to get really balanced, really talented teams. It just might not be with the top level type of scoring or elite athletic ability that you could see. And so I'd kind of hone in on some of these conference futures and think, all right, now that we are getting rid of a lot of the super elite mid-majors just because of the portal, maybe there's other options a little bit further down the board to take advantage of that. And that's where, like, we joke about being the eternal optimist, Greg, but you're always looking for the next kind of edge and the next angle in the betting market. And that, for me, is kind of the next thing as it relates to college hoops, regular season specifically.
And you bring up something so good as well with regards to futures market, because I think that it's a defeatist effort to try to be wagering on any of these futures as of right now, because the odds board is probably going to be changing within the next 24 hours from the time that we do this podcast. And we're, truth be told, doing this Saturday evening, right around about 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, until the time that this posts at midnight Pacific time on Sunday, Easter Sunday. I mean, the odds board might completely flip because of like a few moves in the transfer portal, and then it might flip again on Monday when you have more guys entering in. And I do think that that's something big to be taking a look at, because if you're going to bet anything right now, in my opinion, you want to take a look at those teams a little bit further down the board. Like we even saw Florida. They weren't necessarily a highly touted team coming into the season. They wind up winning the whole shebang. And I just don't think that there's a lot of value betting on those top teams as of right now. Whereas if you just wait a little bit longer, or if you have a good feeling on some team that's like 50-1, 75-1, something like that, maybe you take a small ticket there and leave the rest be until you know a little bit more.
100%. And think about a couple of the teams in the last 2-3 seasons who have been the much ballyhooed, very highly touted teams just because of the raw recruits they were bringing in at the start of the season. I mean, I think about Michigan State 2 years ago, who ended up being an 8 seed, who was a lot of people's number one overall team heading into the year. And like last year, Gonzaga was very highly thought of, a top 5 team. And remember, opening night, they destroyed Baylor, who ended up being a very mediocre team, and so did Gonzaga end of the day. Even though the advanced analytic numbers like them, they were still an 8 seed. So it's one of those things, like, might a Duke sort of Houston type team come down a little bit, come down marginally from a low teens number, and maybe it don't necessarily get the best number? Yeah, of course that happens, but by not playing those, you're also not risking the alternative, which happens every single year with multiple teams that are viewed to be top 10, top 15 sort of teams. And Kansas was another example from last year that ends up being heavily hyped. And we're a 7 seed, and we're not a very good 7 seed in the process of getting to that position. So that's kind of my reminder always, is just understand that when you're talking about teams that are hyped because of the portal or because of the recruiting services, especially with the freshmen coming in, I mean, we really don't know until we get to see him play. And that unknown creates instability. At least you won't find me taking a lot of the short shots when it comes to preseason futures betting.
Yep, right there with you, as Ben Wilson, who does great work over here at VSIN, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ben, we are 2 men that are from the great state of Wisconsin, and I really don't want to talk about UW Green Bay because I do not approve of radio show hosts coaching up their team. But that said, we did see a solid season from Wisconsin. They did lose in the second round of the NCAA tournament to BYU. But I want to get your thoughts on this Badgers team, because it just felt like they turned over a little bit of a new leaf. We're both used to seeing this Wisconsin team play slow and controlled. I remember my senior year of high school. That was the year in which they played that Big Ten tournament game against Penn State, where neither team got to 40 points. And it was probably some of the saddest 40 minutes of basketball I've ever seen in my life. I want to get your thoughts on this Wisconsin team, because right now they haven't done a ton in the portal, but that some moves are going to be coming, and it just felt like there was a little bit of philosophy shift, not just for them, but a lot of Big Ten teams in general, that I think it lends itself much better in this day and age of college basketball, whereas I thought 24 months ago that the Big Ten was sort of stuck in the Stone Age, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, definitely going in the right direction. It's the optimal approach you have to take. I'll do you one better. I think I was in 8th grade. I went to a Wisconsin-Michigan State game at the Kohl Center that the Badgers won like 43-40.
I'm sure Drew Neitzel was playing in that game, because he played in like all Michigan State games for about 10 years.
Yes, he was playing in that game, and that was here in Wisconsin. Yeah, I was a 2 seed and got bulldozed in the NCAA tournament, I think by UNLV, actually. Wisconsin.
Oh, I remember that one.
Very uncompetitive. I can't remember exactly, maybe 07, something like that. I might have been a freshman in high school, but it was not a fun time. And we're in a totally different era. I think Greg Gard has certainly realized the modern strategy of coaching now in 2025, and you got to be a little more up-tempo. More than that, it's all about shot selection. You got to have guys who can hit threes. You need to be able to space the floor, and their rim and 3 rate, which has certainly become much of a more paid attention to metric in college basketball, that's gone up for the Badgers. And you think about how their season ended. I mean, they basically got matched up against the team in BYU that was pretty much a carbon copy of what Wisconsin wanted to do. They just had slightly more talent. And you have to tip your hat in those instances where you get matched up against another super analytically sound team and they just happen to execute a tiny bit better than you do on the given day. So, the fact that John Tanji was hardly, nobody talked about him, nobody knew his name coming into last year, and he became one of the best players in the country. You have to build off that and understand, well, it can't just be hitting one guy in the portal. It's now just comes down to the depth for me. And the issue for Wisconsin is, can they get more than one guy that can hit the open three? Like, they're trying to go that direction. Well, now can they pay that off into having more depth, and you're not relying on one dude taking 60, 70% of your shots when your season's on the line, as what happened to them in the tournament.
Yep, no question about it. I do think that it's a good approach for Wisconsin. I do think that the Big Ten in general did turn over a little bit of a new leaf this season as well. Purdue still plays relatively slowly, and no doubt they're going to need to be a little bit better with that interior defense, but I think that they're taking the right approach, bringing in a few guys in the transfer portal like an Oscar Clough. Illinois, I feel like, was one of the real leaders of the Big Ten in terms of being able to bring in the portal, and a Big Ten that for so long they got a bunch of teams in the NCAA tournament but did nothing whatsoever. I feel like it's trying to turn its attention to being able to make a little bit more of an impact here in 2025 in college basketball, and I think that that's really big, the fact that we have seen more of these Big Ten teams decide to adapt to the transfer portal rather than just stay behind everyone else in terms of college basketball.
Also part of the Big Ten growing and the travel, and it's become much more of a pro-type league. Not that we assume they're just going to immediately over the next offseason be head-to-head with the SEC for best conference, but it's something you kind of have to embrace just naturally when you think about the travel and the number of games against high quality competition, and the fact that the conference games now start end of November, early December. Like, it's just a different world. And, I think that going into the offseason is a really smart approach to have. And Wisconsin, to me, is on the right foot. Purdue, for all their flaws, still found ways to, be a second weekend team and prove that style, it can work. It's just getting the right personnel. And now we kind of begin the fun waiting game of seeing how these teams sort of fill the rest of the pieces, so to speak, and get themselves prepared for that gauntlet that always starts in November.
No doubt. I do think that it's going to be a lot to be diving in on. It's going to be a ton of fun. And Ben, I know you do an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. And you really do a great job on so many different fronts. You're over here at VSIN doing a great job taking a look at all of our live betting shows. So I know that you're very much immersed in the NBA playoffs. You, much like myself, dabble a little bit into NHL. I know that you do a little bit more NBA, much like myself this time of year, but you do a great job on the tennis front. You do a great job on the college baseball front as well, and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, appreciate it as always, sir. Ben_Wilson_1. Lots of live betting shows for VSIN, and you said it, NBA, NHL playoffs, a lot of baseball as well. So fun time of the year, to be sure.
Oh, it certainly is, and it's always a fun time to be able to get Ben aboard. A big thanks to Ben Wilson for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Superstar, part of the VSIN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're right here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSIN Family Podcast. It was great to be able to get Ben Wilson aboard. He does such amazing work here at VSIN, taking a look at so many different fronts, whether that be college basketball, college baseball, tennis, you name it. He does it every single time he joins me. He lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So big thanks to Mr. Wilson for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of all the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Didn't see as many guys commit on Saturday. You're going to notice that things are a little bit slower on the weekends rather than the weekdays. And boy, oh boy, did I need a chance to catch my breath after the 100 million guys decided to transfer over the last few days. But Doran Onchikwa, hopefully you said that correct. He was over at Georgia Tech this last season, a 6'11" freshman that was able to do a nice job on glass. He was able to grab about 5 rebounds per game. Now, he was limited to just 10 games last season due to injury, a few eligibility concerns, what have you, but he has decided that he is going to be going on over to Tulsa. And for Tulsa, this is a relatively good ad for them, a team that they just, let's call it what it is. They had a really rough season this past year, and being able to add a guy like this gives them a little bit more rough and tumble down love, something that they have not had since Brian Settlebongwe a few seasons ago. He joins Miles Rigsby along with Miles Barnstable, so Miles squared in terms of guys that are going to be looking to make an impact. He is the first of real big men that are able to be added here in the offseason for them, so that's a good starting spot for them. And if you're taking a look at his past recruitment, not like some sort of a 5-star guy or anything like that, but he was someone that had a little bit of hype coming around him in the class of 2024. I think that they rated him out more in that like top 175 range, so I do like that pickup for Tulsa, and I do think that he's going to be able to offer a little bit of something moving forward. Alex Hubagirse, he was over at Wright State this last season, kid from Grafton, Wisconsin. I can never say his proper name correct, but he shot 38% from 3, 13.5 points, 3 assists per contest. He has decided that he's going to be going to Bradley. Bradley was the top 3-point shooting team in terms of percentage in all of college basketball last season. Being able to get an ad like this very much is going to be fitting in with that. Now, Wright State did not play necessarily a ton of defense, but Bradley, they're always good at being able to coach up defense. They're already adding A.J. Smith, who was able to supply the team with about 8 rebounds per game. He's coming in from James Madison. I think that this is going to be a good blend in terms of what we're going to be seeing offensively out of them. I do like what he's going to be able to bring to the table for this team. I do like what this man is going to be able to bring as well. Sam Brown, he was over at Penn this past season. He was over at Penn, giving the team 14 points per contest. And for Sam Brown, it was very much a tale of 2 seasons for him, as he had a 42-point game in March. He was able to do a nice job of being able to help the team out towards the back half of the season. For Davidson, this is a team that they very much live and die by 3-point shooting, and I was talking about it on the podcast, I believe it was yesterday, because Davidson has made a few moves. They've got Parker Fredrickson, along Jaquan Roberts, who are going to be coming into the program. This is a program that really lives and dies by its 3-point shooting. Last few seasons has been a little bit rough for them. Being able to bring in someone like a Brown, I think, is going to be very big, because as a freshman, he was a good dynamo 3-point shooter. Last season, again, it was a case where we did see a little bit of a slide in terms of those numbers, shooting overall about 34% from 3-point range last season, but he did give the team at least 12 points in every one of the last 13 games that he played in last season. So in terms of being able to pick things up in the second half of the season, he was very rock solid. And if you look at it from non-conference play to conference play, that was really the key for him. He shot less than 30% from 3-point range in non-conference play. In conference play, he was able to do a much better job, as in conference play, he was shooting more in that neighborhood of about 49.5% from the floor, and from 3-point range specifically, he was able to shoot north of 43% from 3-point range. So I do think that he's going to be a solid pickup for this team, and I think that this one is pretty rock solid as well. As you got Jamarian Keller, he's going to be heading on over to Louisiana. He was averaging 5.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per contest over with Oklahoma State. He had a little bit of a surge towards the back half of the season. And for Louisiana, they're bringing in a lot of guys in general right now. They're really looking to be able to build themselves up after last season. Things were less than savory. They had to let go of Mr. Bob Marlin during the middle part of the season. So this bunch was very much in transition towards the back half of the season. But for Louisiana, they've really gone out the last 48 or so hours, and they've been able to do a nice job picking up some guys. Jackson Olvera, who was able to come on strong towards the middle part of the season. Dorian Finster, who was able to be a solid player over at Sam Houston State, is able to give you a little bit of rebounding. Todd Jones Jr. So they're really starting to fill out this roster. It's a lot of upside guys. You don't have a lot of proven commodities at this point, but I do like what they're building over here. And then with Davidson, I was talking about it just a minute ago with Sam Brown. They're also going to be adding in their Josh Scovins. He was part of Army last season, and he was rock solid with 15 points per contest, was able to throw in there a little bit over 4 boards per contest. I really like what he's able to do for this team, as he was a part of an Army team that had a really good starting 5, and Fast had a really good starting 5. They really didn't have too much in general. And for Davidson, you can tell that they're bringing in some smart guys. You bring in someone in Sam Brown, who is over at Penn. Josh Scovins was in the Patriot League, so these guys are very rock solid. With Scovins, he was able to be a mid-30s 3-point shooter last season as well, so really like what they're able to bring to the table as well. Cam Burn should be able to lend a little bit of 3-point shooting to Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin. He last season was able to do a solid job at Southeast Louisiana. He was averaging about 7 points per contest, shot 37% from 3-point range, so he's going to be staying within the conference. Stephen F. Austin, one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball last few seasons. They just need to be able to get a little bit of pop in general with that regard. Being able to have an ad like this, I think, is going to be very rock solid for them. So I do like what he's able to add there. And if you're looking out there in the great state of Texas as well, Latarius Levicius, he was over at Oregon State this past season. 6'7" wing that was able to average 8.7 points, a little bit over 4 boards per contest, shot 38% from 3-point range. He has decided that he is going to be adding on over to TCU. Another one of these gets that I think is going to be very good for them, because TCU, again, a team that last year, they were just really lacking on offense. I think that they finished outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Really didn't have a lot of creators that were able to pop it and lock it from 3-point range. He and Brock Harding, who's going to be coming on over from Iowa, should be able to help out with that. They also pick up Jaden Pierre, so they've got 3 guys that have right now committed to them via the transfer portal. I really like all 3. Like Jamie Dixon is always a rock solid coach. It was just an uncharacteristic down year for them last season. I think that they are doing a very good job of bouncing back right now, and I do like what they are doing here in the portal. And then you've got Zaxby Sutherland. He last season was at Chicago State, 5.5 points, but an assistant after contest. He has decided that he's going to be going to Elkhorn State. Now, with Elkhorn State, this is a team that looks to build a lot of depth, and I think they can be a depth piece. Like, if you're looking for someone like a Sutherland who wasn't able to be the top scorer over at Chicago State, who was terrible last season, to be coming in and just elevating the program and giving them a whole bunch of production, you're bucking up the wrong tree. But at the same time, if you're asking him to be like guy number 7 that might be able to generate a turnover, might throw in there like 5 to 6 points per contest, this is a solid ad for a team out there in Elkhorn State that they've had a lot of success last 4 or so seasons out there in the SWAC. As we know, the SWAC not necessarily the same level of competition that you're going to be finding in most other conferences, but I do think that he's got a little bit of upside to him, and I do think that moving forward that this is a bunch that's going to be, once again, doing a good job of being towards the top of that conference. You've got Corey Washington, who was over at Wichita State this last season, did a nice job. 13.5 points, 7.5 boards. 2 seasons ago, he was over at St. Peter's for the old Peacocks. He has decided that he is going to be going to SMU. This is a good get for SMU because the one thing that they really liked is that they were just so inconsistent on defense. Now, Corey Washington left a little bit of something to be desired in terms of three-point shooting last year, and SMU was a very good team from the outside. They do have to replace a lot of pieces from that backcourt from a season ago, but being able to get an ad like this, they should be able to give you a little bit more rough and tumble this year with SMU. They have obviously a lot of money because they bought their way into the ACC, and this is really ad number 3 for them. They've also got Jerome Pierre coming in from Jacksonville State, who was just a rock-solid scorer for them, and then Nana Wusu Anane, who is a good rebounder for Brown, went down with an offseason injury and just wasn't able to get out there on the court this past season. They're all going to be added, so I do like what they are doing as well, and I've got to just love what Longwood is doing. Elijah Jones, he's coming on over from Charleston. He's going to be added to Longwood. Now, it's not like he had a massive amount of production this past year. When he was at Charleston, only about 2 points, 3 rebounds per contest. If you look at his previous year, UW Green Bay, during the 2023-24 campaign, about 6.5 boards, 8 points per game, played some good defense under Sundance Wicks. He comes in, and it's just the rich getting richer with regards to Longwood. For Longwood, even though they lose their coach in the offseason, they've been able to do a nice job of being able to pick up the pieces. They've done a nice job of being able to just really reform things. Them at High Point have really been spending a lot of NIL dollars out there in the Big South, but we're even noticing like Charleston Southern has been able to get a few ads here in the offseason. Radford has been able to pick up a few guys. Like the Big South has really stepped up to the plate in terms of low major college basketball, in terms of spending some money. So the Southland, I'll give them a little bit of credit as well, but for Longwood, they're already bringing in Jaquai Hutchinson, who was very good over at George Washington as well. So having Elijah Tucker back in the fold, I think that that's going to be very good for them, and I really do like what is being built over there. So that's something that I think is going to be very impactful moving forward. Dylan Faulkner, he was very rock solid for Lipscomb when he was fully healthy. This past season, when he was only able to get out there for 15 games due to injury, but he was able to give the team about 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. He is going to be adding on over to Sam Amford, and he's going to be playing for Lenny Acuff, so you saw plenty of him in the Atlantic Sun this past season. With Samford, you do have to figure that this is going to be a little bit more of a rough and tumble defense. They're not going to be playing that Bucky McMillan style by any stretch of the imagination, and Acuff was really able to find his footing. First few seasons at the Division I level, you could tell that it was just taking a little bit of time for him to find out, all right, what am I supposed to be doing now that I'm going from Division II Huntsville and now I'm taking over a Division I program? He was really able to find that this past season in terms of being able to get these guys that were able to play very well defensively. Now he's going to have a few more resources and a little bit more NIL money to be able to build out an even better form of what he's looking to do. So you have to figure that Samford going to be in the market for a few more three-point shooters. They really haven't done a ton in the transfer portal just yet, but I do think that this is a very nice first act, and I do think that things are going to be getting even better moving forward. You've got this man staying within the Atlantic 10, LaSalle transfer Deuce Jones. He was the Rookie of the Year in the conference. He was averaging about 12.5 points, a steal and a half per contest. he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to St. Joe's, and St. Joe's looking to not be average Joe's. They had a really good starting five last year, and they were really good in terms of the defensive post positions as well. For St. Joe's, they finally were able to figure out a little bit more of that blend. Couldn't quite do just enough to be able to make the NCAA tournament. That said, I do feel very bullish about this program. They haven't necessarily made a bunch of splash moves in the transfer portal quite yet, but you have to feel like more is going to be coming for them. Al Amidu is already coming on over from Marquette, a guy that just wasn't able to see a lot of minutes out there in the Big East. So I do think that this is a good place to be able to start, and I do think that he's going to be able to make a nice impact for them. Jaden Jackson, he last season was over at Northern Arizona. He was a nice mid-30s three-point shooter, 12.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest. He's decided that he's going to be going to Cal Baptist. For Cal Baptist, so one thing that was really eluding them last season was three-point shooting. Now, Jackson was part of a defense that was a little bit, shall we say, struggling, but heading out over to Cal Baptist, I think that he's going to be able to do a nice job just inserting his energy in general on the offensive side of things, being able to help them out. He's able to be a relatively good facilitator, and you saw that last year, Dominique Daniels, he had to do a little bit of everything from Cal Baptist, so now that things are going to be a little bit more dispersed in terms of the offense, him and Chris Mbakpa, who's going to be coming on over from Tarleton State, they should be able to elevate this team, and Mbakpa is able to give them some good defense coming on over from Tarleton State as well in terms of being able to generate turnovers, and this is someone that decided to make their decision on Saturday as well. Nick Anderson, he was over at Prairie View this last season, only played in 12 games, but in the 12 games that he played, he was very good. 19 points, 5 boards, was able to shoot north of 40% from the floor, shot right around about 40% from three-point. He has decided that he's going to be going to Rice. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin, go Owls, and this is exactly what Rice needed. As for Anderson, he's going to be able to give this team a little bit more in terms of the outside shooting. That's something that Rice was really lacking, and Rice needs a ability to be able to hold on to the ball a bit more in general. Now, I will say in terms of the bunch at Prairie View was last season. They were a team that turned the ball over a little bit too much, but they would generate turnovers in return. Oversold Nick Anderson a little bit in terms of that three-point shooting, closer to about 33% from three-point range, but still, I think that he's going to be able to do a nice job stepping into that offense, being able to give them a nice big giant burst of energy, and I think this guy's going to be able to lend some energy as well as Duquesne with a nice add on Saturday with Jimmy Williams coming on over from South Florida, 7.5 points per contest. He was able to shoot 40% from three-point range at 6'5". He's able to spread the floor. Duquesne needs a few more guys like this. Being able to get this sort of a pickup, I think, is going to be very good for them. So I absolutely love what I'm seeing there. Santiago Triot, he was over at San Diego this last season. 8.5 points, 7 boards per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to Arizona State. I wish I had more for you here, but if Arizona State is relying upon Santiago Triot, who I believe that he was an international man of mystery, it's just a case where if he's seeing meaningful minutes, Arizona State is not going to be having a good year. If this is a little bit more of depth add, and Arizona State has added a bunch of guys here over the last few weeks, then you know what? It's understandable, but hopefully it's not seeing a whole bunch of minutes. This is a little bit of news, though. Duncan Boom Boom Powell, he last season was over at Georgia Tech. He was averaging 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, shot 36% from three as a 6'8" combo player. 2 years ago at Sacramento State was a do-it-all sort of player. Looked like he was going to be going to Georgetown. He is now decommitted from Georgetown, and I am going to be keeping track of the guys that decommit because this is a big blow for a Georgetown team that they're obviously looking to be able to get things up and running. They were bringing in Deshaun Harris-Smith, a former top 50 recruit that never panned out at Maryland. Langston Love is coming in. KJ Lewis. Like, they've done a nice job of being able to have their haul being really all set. And for Duncan Powell, he was going to be that versatile guy that could do a little bit of this and that, paired well with Langston Love as well. Losing him, I think, is very big. And whoever picks up Duncan Boom Boom Powell, I think that they're going to be very happy with him. I think that this team is going to be very happy as well. Boston College, they bring in a Forte, Chase Forte, who last season he was over at South Dakota State. He was able to average 18 points per contest, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and was the Defensive Player of the Year out there in the Summit League. Boston College just really needs W's in general because last year it was Donald Hand who had to do a little bit of everything for them, and Boston College took them a little bit of time to get up and running in the transfer portal, but they bring in Aiden Shaw, Broden Koepka. Now they bring in a proven scorer and a guy that's able to put the ball in the bucket. I think that this is a very nice add for them. Ryan Mabry, he was over at Quinnipiac this last season, was able to average only about 4.5 points per contest, had a little bit more success over at Miami of Ohio a few seasons ago, where he shot about 36-37% from three-point range, was able to log 7 points per contest. He is going to be going on over to Maine. Maine was really able to unlock a lot more offense over the last few seasons, and I do think that with Maine, they are really doing a nice job under Chris Markwood of being able to build themselves up. Like, this was a terrible program before he had came in. Now they're doing a great job being able to generate turnovers, being able to be a stout defensive team, so absolutely love what he's going to be able to bring there. Jacksonville State's Corral House, he was able to average this past season about 8.5 points per contest, one of the best freshmen out there in Conference USA, 3 assists per game. He has decided that he is going to be going to Southern Illinois, and for Southern Illinois, they were able to improve towards the back half of the season in terms of their offense. It took them a little bit of time to be able to get their footing, to be able to really learn the Scott Nagy style. For Scott Nagy, you have to figure that he's going to be under quite a bit of pressure here in season number 2 at Southern Illinois, as they've got very high expectations, but I think that this sort of an ad is going to be able to help them be able to reach a lot of those goals and a lot of those expectations. In general, Southern Illinois hasn't necessarily brought in a lot of guys in the transfer portal just yet. I believe that this is pretty much their biggest move to this point, but being able to add a guy like this, I think is going to be able to be a nice addition for that backcourt. We'll see what else is to come, because they're going to need a little bit of help down low as well, and this team is going to be getting a little bit of help as well, as you've got Luke Jungers deciding that he is going to return to Iona. Yes, a rare ad in the transfer portal, which a guy is going back to where he came. For Luke Jungers last season, he had come over from Omaha, averaged about 5.5 points per contest. Not a guy that necessarily dazzled or anything like that, but he had 6'5", was able to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range, was a relatively rock solid guy there. In his best years over at Omaha, was averaging more like 7 points per contest. Not going to be a guy that's necessarily lighting the world on fire for this team, but has a little bit of familiarity with regards to the Metro Atlantic, has been just with this team in general. I think that this is going to be very good for them moving forward, and just being able to show that you're able to have a little bit of camaraderie, I think that that's going to be big as well. And then Hofstra's Khalil Farber, he has decided that he is going to be going to UMass Lowell. He last season over at Hofstra was able to give the team right around about 4.5 points per contest. Not necessarily a super duper impact guy, because Hofstra had really a big 2 in terms of that backcourt, but Khalil Farmer being able to come in, being able to give this team a nice little shot of energy. And this was a guy that shot about 35% from 3-point range. I think that he's going to be able to help out a UMass Lowell team that just lost Martin Somerville, and he's going to be able to help fill that role, going down a little bit of a level in terms of the competition as well. I think that that's going to be helpful for them, and hopefully this podcast is helpful for you, because we're looking at what is happening every single day in college basketball. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuz Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And big thanks once again to our good friend Ben Wilson for joining me in the last segment, and I'll be with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.